Attention, functional fitness athletes or barbell athletes, every time you work out, your body is telling you secrets that you can use to then improve your performance. That's right, your body is telling you no evals, no money needs to be spent. Your body's telling you what needs to be done. This series is going to give you an insight to those little tips that your body's already telling you. Attention in CrossFit and functional fitness athletes, every time you go into lower back extension, whether you're lifting overhead, doing gymnastics, a barbell lift, whatever it may be, your low back is sending signals saying that something is going on here that I don't like. What's happening there? What's the secret that your low back is telling you? When you go into back extension, you'll find out in this video. When we start feeling discomfort, most of the time it's from doing something for too long and not loading the tissues in the other way. When we're starting to get that low back discomfort, when we're getting into these gymnastic movements, barbell lifts and things like that, we have to look at, well, what's the position that we're loading into? So Brandy, go ahead and pick up the barbell. What we see is that people have gotten so afraid of herniating a low disc, a lumbar disc, from the research that's been out there, that people are super arching their back at the bottom of the deadlift. So Brandy's set up, you can see she has this big arch in her back. Instead of having, show me a neutral pelvis in there. Research shows us that we don't need to be worried about spinal flexion creating a disc herniation, because in the living human system, when we look at a dynamic MRI, we see that flexion actually can create a anterior migration of the disc instead of a posterior one. So we need to have flexion, we need to have extension, we need to have a neutral pelvis. Now, in the squat position, people, again, they get so nervous about herniating a disc that they go into a super arched low back position to try to protect it. They stay too far into lumbar extension. The lumbar facet joints are starting to hit on each other and they're just going, I'm annoyed, stop doing this to me. So instead, we want to get a neutral pelvis position, keep that neutral, and then go back down. If you're keeping tension, your spine is safe, your disc is not going to slip out of the back and stick onto the wall. You will be okay. The other thing we want to talk about quickly is the IQ. You've probably heard this. Look up when you're lifting. Brandon, show us what people typically do when they hear that. They arch their head up, which then is going to make the low back want to arch with it. That cue is never meant to be, go ahead, you can put that down. That cue is never meant to be looking up towards the ceiling with your head. It was meant to look up with your eyes, because when you look up with just your eyeballs, what it does is activate the vestibular spinal tract, which are these smaller muscles that go down the spine for postural stability. So make sure that if you are looking up, whether it's a squat, whether it's a deadlift, whatever lift it may be, that you're looking with your eyes and not cranking your head back like that. That low back is spending too much time in extension with your lifts. We actually want to start to recreate some lumbar flexion, and we're going to do this with lighter load. So Brandy's going to go into quadruped position, hands and knees. You've probably seen cat and camel. We're only going to focus on the cat, and we want to focus on this lumbar segment of getting this to be able to flex, tucking the tail underneath. So you can see as Brandy does this, she gets really great flexion through here. Maybe the low back is limited a little bit. So have a friend, you can have your partner come and give you a cue, where they're on the belly button, they're on the sacrum, and you're just tilting, you're just doing this to try to get more flexion here in the lumbar segments, to get flexion through there. It's difficult if you haven't spent a lot of time in this position and you've been going into, show us the camel, when you've been trying to protect your back by staying in this position. Again, we need to decrease the fear. Know that your system is robust and resilient. It will adapt to the forces placed upon it. We don't need to live in this position when you're lifting to protect your back. A little bit of flexion in that lumbar spine is okay when you're lifting, and when you don't have load, it's a great time to get more lumbar flexion going. So after this, once you've mastered this, we're actually going to bring you up and add a very light load to this with the controversial Jefferson curl. Yes, there's a time and place for it. Are we loading it up super heavy? Not yet, but we could. With the Jefferson curl, we're going to go ahead and pick up that kettlebell. We're going to start from a top position again, light load. Brain's going to think about every vertebrae flexing forward as she starts to go down. So starting from the head, mid-back, working to that low back. Kettlebell starts to go down. She's keeping her legs straight, trying to get some flexion here in that lumbar spine. Come back up. We're going to do that a couple more times. Go ahead, head down. We're gradually exposing your spine to some flexion load, showing that you are robust, you're resilient, that it's safe for your spine to have some flexion in there. And it's actually an advantage to train it that way because it's unavoidable in your lifts. One more time, we're also trying to reverse the idea that we need to be super arched back when we're lifting. We can get to a neutral pelvis. We need to spend some time out of that super big extension and a little bit more time in some lightly loaded flexion. We've talked about position with barbell lifting. We use the cat and we use the Jefferson curl to get some lumbar flexion. But what we now need to do is some more sport-specific conditioning using the SED principle. What does this mean? It means that can you keep good position when you're doing higher level movements like gymnastics on the bar or with some overhead movements? Because again, we're trying to protect the back, so we tend to try to arch it too much instead of allowing ourselves to stay neutral. This happens a lot on toes to bar, kipping pull-ups, kipping for muscle-ups. And what it tends to look like is people over kip. They use this huge swing to get there. That's a lot of fast, high velocity lumbar extension that you want to be able to control. One of my favorite cues is that you want to stay in a phone booth. A lot of people haven't seen a phone booth in a while. It's a pretty small space. It's not this giant one, it's pretty small. You want a nice tight kip, keep tension. That's going to transfer you to get up there. If that's not the case, we would debate that you have not developed enough strict strength to be able to do kipping pull-ups. If you cannot do strict pull-ups, you should not be kipping yet. Get your strict strength first and then add in kipping. So what does our kip swing look like? We want to keep it nice and tight in the phone booth, Superman, hollow position, keeping tight, not forcing ourselves into high velocity lumbar extension. Overhead pressing, same idea. When we go up overhead, we don't want to get into this arch back position. We want to keep integrity. Right now I have a pretty big anterior pelvic tilt. I want to get myself neutral and then keep my core stacked as I'm going up with those weights. Now, those are 2 quick drills of positioning. We know that positioning matters with every lift that you're going to be doing. The other factor we haven't mentioned yet is that this is all before I become fatigued. My first pull-up, 5th pull-up, first overhead press, 5th overhead press, they may look fine. But what about a Metcon? We're 30 minutes in, we're exhausted, we're trying to still breathe, we're trying to let our shoulders not be earrings, we're trying to figure out how to keep moving. That's when things get sloppy. So this is where in your practice, in your sessions, get fatigued, use a pre-fatigue protocol, and then see, can I keep good position while kipping? Can I keep good position while doing overhead movements? Can I keep good position with all these other things? Mind-body connection. It becomes way harder when you're fatigued. So that would be one of the last steps to make sure that you can transfer this skill to get rid of that low back yelling at you from going into too much extension. Your body's telling you that secret that it's not liking lumbar extension. And the reason it's telling you that is because it says, I've spent too much time here. I want to experience some other positions, whether that's a neutral pelvis or lumbar flexion. Now, to achieve this, we need to decrease our fear. If you have a little bit of lumbar flexion, your disc is not automatically going to herniate. Here's a link to a research article actually showing the opposite of what we've been taught about disc herniations. Newer science is showing us some newer things that is saying we need to change the way that we think about these types of movements in our position and not fearing these types of movements. Other thing to note is that when you go to move, your lumbar spine is flexing, so you might as well become resilient to that type of load. Hoping you are enjoying this content. Our mission is to empower hope to those plagued by nope. If you've stopped doing movements that you love, if you're afraid of lumbar flexion because of the nope that you've been delivered, we are here to give you the hope to allow you to get back to those things that you love. These videos are just short glimpses into what you can do to take control. There's much more to the recipe. These are just a few ingredients, but we hope you're enjoying it. If you are, share it with a friend, subscribe, leave a comment below.